Hey, federal employees, breaking news yesterday. The Justice Department just tore up a 44-year-old Luévano consent decree. It was an agreement that junked a nationwide civil service test for federal employees after it was found that the old PACE exam slammed Black and Latino applicants and still failed the fairness test. So please pause that scroll, double tap to support, and stay to the end to hear how one bubble sheet could drag federal hiring back to the 1970s and how the administration might be planning to use biased, outdated testing that doesn't even predict job performance to select your new colleagues, even if it's not scientifically validated. But to put some context, remember back then in the 60s and 70s, to remind us where we're coming from and set the stage, let's talk about the legal profession. Then white men were only about 42% of Americans, yet they held about 96% of all law licenses, proof that neutral tests locked talent out. So back then, why was Luévano needed? Well, because back then the science showed that PACE blocked qualified people of color and didn't predict job success. The score gap moved with vocabulary and the coaching, not with raw ability. Essentially, the test wasn't good. Change the words and the gap moves. Real talent doesn't swing like that, right? When a test isn't built right, it measures culture, not skill. Ask about sailing regattas, APA Latin or lacrosse stats, and you'll tilt towards white suburbs. Flip to Divine Nine Founders, Double Dutch Footwork, or HBCU homecoming chants, and you tilt the other way. Science shows that neither of these are going to prove who secure a network, who can write a regulation, or do their job particularly well and serve Americans of all backgrounds. Right, so I think there are legal landmines ahead if they try to move forward with a new test. Title VII and uniform guidelines, any exam that hits one group harder must prove it predicts performance. So a single Scantron for 2 million wildly different federal jobs can't do that. That's less relevant is to predicting success, the more it cannot pass scrutiny if it contains biases. Otherwise, it's just an intentional step to add bias without adding any value. Veterans preference and merit laws. Congress says vets get points and agencies must weigh real experience. A generic quiz will erase that. Administrative Procedure Act, roll out a test without airtight scientific validation. A judge can label it arbitrary and capricious. Think about the work. A NASA rocket engineer, a USDA meat inspector, and a Head Start teacher need totally different skills. So one test, a potentially racially biased test, can't measure them all. It would be like picking both a brain surgeon and an NFL coach with the same multiple choice worksheet, which wouldn't even make any sense to begin with. And again, especially if the test is culturally insensitive in favor of certain groups. Right, so the science on this is clear. 2025 meta-analysis shows structured interviews and job-specific work samples beat general cognitive tests for predicting performance. In other words, the system right now is way better than any test. That's why corporations don't test and hire that way, and it would be laughable and outrageous for the government to start doing so. So Bias 2.0, who will write the new exam? The same administration that just tried to kill disparate impact or is attacking essentially women, people of color, and others through executive orders? Are these the people that should be hiring the people to make the test? Now, certainly tests can be fair, but only when each question is tied to the actual job and every score is monitored for racial, gender, age, disability gaps, and is viewed as a single data point in a complex hiring decision. You aren't your test. Right? Scrapping the rule that demand of those checks screams that fairness isn't the plan, and we should all be on the lookout. So ask yourself, does one bubble sheet measure grit, teamwork, or crisis judgment, or just who bought the right prep course or grew up in the right part of the country? Club. So let this slide and we'll lose cyber defenders, nurses, and engineers of every color while paying lawyers to fight the fallout. All of this for whose benefit? What sort of administration would make testing a priority now and why? What are they really trying to do? Right, so tell Congress, your union, and OPM merit is more than a bubble sheet. Demand hiring tools that fit the job and treat every American fairly. Anything less is bad science, bad law, and bad government. So no reasonable leaders would want to do this. And if it doesn't have a reason behind it and it can be biased in favor of certain groups, what is the real reason they might be trying to do this? So we're definitely going to watch, hold them accountable. We'll follow the story as it develops. Thank you, everybody, for your support, and hope you have a good day.